Hey everyone, Mewtwo back with part 3 of my E3 coverage, and by god, it's the third time recording this, and both times prior were quite long videos, so this better bloody work this time. Stupid phone and stupid not recording right. Ugh. Anyway, in part 1 I talked about Microsoft, and in part 2 I talked about Sony and Ubisoft. I'll put links up above in annotations. So, of course, naturally, gotta talk about Nintendo. I suppose a lot of the focus this year was around them and what they were going to do with the Wii U. So much so that before E3 even began, on Sunday night they had the pre-E3 kind of Wii U unveiling, whatever they want to call it. And the whole point of it really was to kind of get the hardware out there, talk about the features and the controller and so on, and kind of get that content done and dusted with, so that in the main presentation itself they could actually focus a bit more on the games and applications. I think that's actually a good idea, twofold. One, an hour and a half to do a platform launch is tough, especially if you have a lot of complicated messages that you feel you want to communicate, and you had the 3DS that you want to mention too. On top of that, it also did enable Nintendo though to kind of get a bit of a preemptive strike against any release that Sony and Microsoft were going to put forward, things like Smart Glass. So they kind of got in first with their concepts about different types of gameplay and so on. And as for the presentation, the pre E3 presentation itself, it was fairly well done. It was simple, just a watcher speaking in front of the camera about what the Wii U is and how it's evolved, and they showed the changes from the prototype to the real controller, and how it's got real analog sticks now, and the ergonomics have changed slightly. And one of the kind of key features that they mentioned, but kind of hasn't been discussed that much, is the inclusion of a TV button and an infrared remote type setup. And they showed a touchpad where you could enter in the channel numbers and so on. I think personally that that's actually a really important feature. Now, by having an IR in there, what they're basically saying is you can use this to turn on and off your telly and to control your TV as well. So you don't need a TV remote. Simply, you would just use the Wii U controller as your universal controller. Now, if you do that, you're much more inclined to utilize the Wii U itself as well, or its extra features. It's just going to become more integrated into your lifestyle. I'm sure that's the goal. Now, if you look at something like what Microsoft were doing with Smart Glass, it's very much a different thing. Smart Glass allows different devices to also share information, but they're separate. So you have your gameplay and whatnot, and you could have a tablet with the information on it too. So it's not a singular cohesive solution. It's actually very disjoint. Whereas the Wii Gamepad, as they're calling it, potentially offers, with the kind of inbuilt kind of universal control feature, much more of a this is your gateway. And I think in terms of breaking down barriers, which is a key message that Nintendo always try to put forth, that's very important. Make it much more not like this is a console, this is a separate thing. This is the central thing that you do when you come home and you go to put on your TV. You put on the Wii U and your TV together, and of course then it leads into the separate screen as a big feature. You see games where someone might want to turn on the TV, but hey, I want to watch a movie or whatever, and this person wants to play a game. Of course they can do that, or they want to do Wii Fit, and they can do that separately. So it is clever. It's integrated, but can be separated. So I can see the philosophy that they're going for, and it is, and that's one thing that Nintendo do try and do with their design, and I think a lot of people don't necessarily appreciate, is that the challenges that they're trying to overcome are very much social issues versus technological issues. It would be much easier in many ways just to throw in a faster processor, because that's what we always do. Now, having said that, I did feel in terms of the hardware that there was a lot of missing information. They talked a fair bit about the controller, which is understandable, but the actual machine itself, barely mentioned. They didn't mention what sort of storage it's going to use, both the optical media presumably, and is it going to have internal storage of any description, and what sort of expansion is it going to allow, standard USB hard drives, SD cards, or what? Is it going to go down the Microsoft route and have a proprietary piece of crap? Is Sony are worse for that with the Vita memory cards? Is it going to have Wi-Fi N? Is it going to have inbuilt Ethernet? Or, these are kind of things that are very much out in the open. Even what sort of video output, presumably HDMI, but what are the other options? That they just didn't address, and they also didn't address the real kind of big points of when's it coming out, how much, and didn't even dawn on me at the time, which is probably a good thing. It just shows that I was immersed in the presentation and taking in information about what you could do with the controller and with the system, more so than thinking about the bottom line. But at the end of the day, just like with the 3DS, when I knew the price point and what it was offering, I was like, no, that's too much. It's not worth it. I don't see any benefit. And a lot of people felt that way too. They dropped the price, and hey, it seems a lot more appealing now. Now, the Wii U, I think, as a whole, the concept is interesting, but how interesting depends on how expensive. Even with the content that I'll get to about that's shown in the conference, software will only go so far. Just look at things like the Saturn. When it launched at $399 dollars, Virtual Fighter was definitely a key game, and if the price had been $299, I think we would have seen a totally different reaction versus the Saturn take up and the PlayStation take up. But however, they also then talked about just one other little note. The black system and controller looked a hell of a lot nicer in my opinion than the white one. But sadly, while it is going to be available, it's not going to be available at launch, which I really don't like my consoles all that much. I've grown to dislike them more and more over time, so that's a shame. But anyway, they also talked about things like the connectivity feature of Miiverse, and how this was going to be an important social networking aspect. And it was nice to see Nintendo take, or basically have a Nintendo-ized version of social networking, and how they were going to integrate that into the Mii experience and expand it from what we've seen in the Wii and the 3DS. And of course it's going to be web-based, so eventually it'll be available on any sort of web-enabled device. And that's pretty cool, but they showed some demos of in-game stuff, like in Mario you could see messages from other Miis and about each levels, and you could see them on the dashboard, as it were, of the console, congregating around the titles with messages and communications. And they spoke about video chat, which would be another nice feature to have as well. So a lot of nice kind of content there. I think in terms of understanding Miiverse, and it's one of those things you really have to see a bit more of to truly know will it take off or not. Even things like if you look at something like Street Pass or similar type of 3DS services, they're decent, but they're not that wow inducing in my opinion. I think that their takeoff depends on your kind of environment and who and if your console is going to be in line, much that type of thing. Like with the Street Pass, I wouldn't be passing people with 3DS all that often. Certainly not when I first had it. It was very rare. So it wasn't much of a feature. As a slight note, there was also some suggestion that maybe there might be achievements integration into the Miiverse thing. I think that would be a definite improvement. I know you end up with the whole trophy whore, game points, and I don't really care for all that very much. But there's two things that I do find interesting about trophies and gamer points. One, it gives you additional goals and targets to aim for, which can be nice because it adds replayability. And two, it kind of just gives you an overview of what someone else has played or like to have played, and how much in depth they've gone into it. So when you exchange on PSN or on Xbox Live your ID with them, you can basically see what they've played, and I find it actually quite interesting to say, oh look, they played that much, and oh, they completed all of that game. So I think that's nice, and I would definitely like to see Nintendo included in Miiverse. So that was pretty much the pre-E3 show. As I said, they were predominantly just trying to get across the philosophy message of the Wii U and what the gamepad was going to do. Also, notably, the Wii U name stuck. They didn't change it. I had a feeling they wouldn't. So, on to the main conference itself. Now, I always find that Nintendo do good presentations in terms of the personalities that, Reggie, and they have Miyamoto usually out for kind of a bit, and Bill Trinan, he's quite nice as well. So I always feel that there's good synergy between the Nintendo of America presenters, and especially Reggie. He's incredibly good at presenting and conveying his message. You can certainly see why he's gathered a following and he's moved up the corporate ladder pretty damn fast. But anyway, they started off with Miyamoto behind stage with a little video of him kind of getting ready, and the Pikmin are all around him, which is obviously a clue that Pikmin was coming up. And one of them hides in his little jacket, and he comes out on stage with basically a teddy in the jacket. At one point, he nearly looked like he was going to throw it into the audience. Jesus, if he did and he caught it out, I'd say that'd be worth a fair bit of money down the line. So, yeah, of course, naturally that led into a Pikmin 3 demo, and that was the first thing we seen from Nintendo, of kind of a proper game from them, and it looked good. I have to say, it definitely kind of set aside any fears that the Wii U wasn't going to be up to the PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360 standard in terms of graphical output, which by now is definitely required. I mean, those consoles are 6 years old. The generation ordinarily would be over it any other time. I mean, people talk about like, oh, the Wii dying. Well, that's a typical lifespan that we would experience, and it feels like the Wii had fit into that type of model. Whereas, of course, Microsoft only had said that they were going for extended lifespans. It turns out to be true. They lost so much money on their platforms, it makes sense that they basically have to extend them out now. So, yeah, Pikmin, and it looked very nice. Didn't seem to be remarkably new, but a nice evolution, and used the gamepad quite well. They also made a comment that it uses the Wii Motion Plus and Nunchuk controllers, which made me think, I wonder is that an indication that the game started off on Wii, because they did mention it in previous E3s that there was something in the works. So it wasn't a massive surprise or anything, but maybe not. As a general theme, throughout the presentation, you would typically see the Wiimote in tandem with the gamepad. Most of the games, I suppose, are multiplayer in nature, so that's partly why that was there. But it does make me wonder, are we going to get a Wiimote in the box? Is it going to be just, is there going to be an expectation that people will have them? Or is it going to be another just sold separately type of thing, like the, what do they call it, the professional controller, that basically look like, some people say it looked like an Xbox 360 controller, which I think is a bit amusing, given that the Xbox 360 controller basically looks like a PlayStation 3 controller, which basically looks like a GameCube controller, and it can be traced back to a SNES controller, with the diamond buttons and controller on one side with shoulder pads. There's been a slow evolution, so I wouldn't say that they were copying Microsoft, it was just that's the evolution of control. So it looked nice anyway, and it was nice and black. Anyway, back to Pikmin, getting off topic. So yeah, apparently they made a note that Captain Olimar was not there, and that was a secret, so I'm guessing a story thing. And they seem to have some nice multiplayer elements and a new Pikmin type, and overall it looked like a good game, and it was a good way to set up. It was a different type of franchise, one that does have a bit of a following, and it was a nice introduction that looked well. And they also made a comment that the Pikmin 3 shows how fun, deeper games that still be made within the industry, even though there has been seen that there's this move to casual gaming. And then Reggie comes on stage and says that this show is largely all about the games, so little introduction to the controller again for those that wouldn't have seen the pre-3 show, but that they plan to show something, I think it was 23 titles, Wii U titles. And people, I've heard a lot, because as I've recorded this twice, I've seen more. Like for start, when I first recorded this, I hadn't seen the separate 3DS presentation. Now I have, but I've also seen some more feedback, and people seem to be saying that, there wasn't much content in the conference. Now they said there was 23 titles, and by and large it was about that. that's pretty. I mean, Sony had about 10, Microsoft had about something like 15. So they nearly had about, and certainly if you include the 3DS stuff, they had easily more titles than Microsoft and Sony combined. So to kind of make a statement that there's nothing in the conference, there's no titles, I think that's misrepresentation of the facts. Um, but anyway, they they also said there's many more titles on the floor, and to be fair, I haven't seen many of those yet, which I would have liked to have done. They made a comment about how Netflix, Hulu, YouTube, Amazon videos, and so on are coming to Wii U, but thankfully, while they said that it's going to be there, you're going to have those features. They did not dwell on it like Microsoft, who just went crazy on sport and whatnot services. And they did do a fair bit of plugging though on their e3.nintendo.com and their social networking feeds, Twitter and so on. That was interesting because none of the other companies, Sony, Microsoft, and so on, they didn't talk about that at all, or that type of approach to information exchange. And I think they're really missing out. Modern marketing really does make sense to use technology in that way. I mean, say for example, it's often been said that E3 is a gamers show. And I've said in my earlier videos, I think it was part 1 actually, that it's not really a gamers show per se anymore. It's a media presentation to show what's coming out. It just so happens that some of the games will be core games, but as the audience has, or the target of audiences has expanded, you're going to see a lot more non-traditional content. And over the long term, that is a good thing, even if it has short-term growing pains. So, I was surprised that they missed out. Like a good example was with the pre-E3 show. I mean, if you're putting things like that and trailers up on YouTube and links to those things in Facebook and whatnot, people who have Wii's and 3DSs and whatnot, but are a bit more casual, maybe signed up to Nintendo's feeds on those services, but won't necessarily be going to watch the conference on G4 or Spike TV or whatever. So they're going to get this information that they could have very easily missed out on, and they will see things. They might not have looked at, say, Zombie U and Batman and Mass Effect, things like that, and be interested, but they might see things like, Just Dance, and say, ooh, another Just Dance. So I think that was, I'm surprised the other companies were missing out on that type of marketing approach. The big plug then was that they were going to do asymmetric gameplay, and how this had not been really done before. And I have a note here saying, what about Four Swords? I mean, basically the concept of asymmetric gameplay is two people experiencing the same game, but really from different perspectives and with different objectives. And if you've played any of the GBA Link games in GameCube, particularly Four Swords Adventures, because that was just great, that's exactly what that was. You had different views, you would be doing different things, and you'd be working together at the same time. Now, having played those games, I can tell you that if they can bring that experience to the Wii U, it will be great. Because Four Swords Adventures in 4-player, very hard to set up. You ever need Game Boy Advances and cables and whatnot. But when you get it set up, it is a superb experience and highly recommended. And same with Crystal Chronicles or whatever the Final Fantasy one was, and the Pac-Man Versus. They also made a comment, although they didn't show anything for it, was that the system would support 2 Wii U gamepads, but that they would run at 30 frames per second. Now, that's fine, I would say. For the FPS, as long as it's solid 30, I'd say that would be fine. Most people wouldn't perceive too much of a performance increase beyond that, because the perception for continuous motion is far lower than 30. You can get away with 20 really, 30 is fine. They did say that there will be no demonstrations of it, but it'll come down later down the line. So I wonder if we really will see too much 2 gamepad support. Perhaps it'll be external developers. Now, we're over 15 minutes in and we've had one game and a lot of preamble, so for a show that said they were going to talk a lot about games, they've had a lot of bump as well. Now, they did bring out what would probably be considered their big gun, and that was New Super Mario Bros. U. And one thing I will say, other than that Mario, it's Mario, it's going to be good, is that there was a hell of a lot of Mario in the conference as a whole. Doesn't necessarily mean, in fact, they're going to be good games. It's just there was a lot of it. So yeah, the trailer looked nice. It had a bit of Miiverse stuff in it too, as I mentioned, and they had a new flying squirrel power up. And there was multiple Yoshis with different abilities, and again it had the thing of Wiimotes and gamepad, and just like Rayman, which I mentioned in the Ubisoft presentation, the person on the gamepad can put blocks on screen, so that the people that are looking at the telly can use the blocks, or they could hinder them by putting blocks to to get in their way. So it has that kind of interaction with different perspective that Rayman was doing as well. So I wonder, was there an element that Ubisoft were inspired by that, because no doubt Nintendo were had that in the works beforehand. Um, they then moved into what I'd call their third party section. Some people were a little disappointed with this, and I can understand why, but I think it was okay. And they had Warner Brothers come out and they introduced Batman Arkham City Armored Edition. And it was actually introduced by Harley Quinn, the voiceover, which was a nice touch. And the trailer looked good. The few things to note was, again, this ish definitely was on par, at least, with the PlayStation 3. I wouldn't necessarily say it looked any better, or if it was better, it's, the margin of increase is not really worth anything. It's kind of like people say that the PlayStation 3 is more powerful than the Xbox. Yeah, we see it on screen all the time. It's diminishing returns by this stage, and I think that's I suppose part of the reason why it will be hard. While it's an easy decision to throw in bigger processors, it is also kind of hard to keep increasing graphical content, because the cost of development goes up, and just requires far more resources. The cost of hardware becomes very expensive. I mean, that's why Sony and Microsoft took massive hits on their platforms. Whereas now the PlayStation 3 spec technology is 6 years old. So for Nintendo to step from the Wii up to the Wii U, it looks like a big step because it is, but for them it's still relatively cost effective, and they can put most of the expense of their system, most likely, into the controller. But I thought the game looked good. Now, I haven't played the new one, I've played the original one on the PlayStation 3, and it was great. So I could definitely see that being if you haven't played it, it would be a must-have title. People's complaints is, well, it's been out for 6 months already, it'll be in the bargain bin, or if it's not already, by the time the Wii U comes out. So is there really enough in the way of features in the Wii U version? It does some nice touches, like using the touchscreen for extra items and to simplify content, and things like when you place the explosive charges, you can set them off individually, or you can look for targets using detective mode and whatnot. It looks like a good addition. It may even be the best addition. Whether or not it's enough, I don't really know. I suppose by setting that one up, and a few other titles in the list as a third party content, I think they were really trying to send the message that the Wii did not get these games, but the Wii U is going to get them. I mean, if you look at things like Batman was not on the Wii. If you look at games like Dead Space, that was on the Xbox and the PlayStation, but then it was Dead Space Extraction on the Wii. Now some would say, well, it's great to have a unique experience, but for a lot of people, if they're investing into one platform, they want to be able to get the same, the kind of higher end budget title, if that's how they're going to describe it. They might like the Dead Space Extraction as well, but they want the real thing. Now, Dead Space is not on this list, I'm just using that as an example. So then Warner Bros. Showed off, it was Scribblenauts Unlimited. Very much to balance out, I think, Batman is, because Batman is much more of perhaps a hardcore property, although Batman's a big franchise, but Scribblenauts would definitely appeal to perhaps a younger audience. And I was never a massive fan of the Scribblenaut games. Basically, I thought you actually typed in words in them, but this one seemed to be typed in words and it produced the item for you. This one seemed to let you monkey around with items yourself. So it'd be interesting. And instead of being set puzzles, it seems more open ended. I imagine if you like Scribblenauts, it would be a good title in the franchise. And as I said, it would have broadened the appeal of the system to those that wouldn't necessarily be appeal or that Batman would appeal to. Um, so then they went into a reel of games, and again, this ties into the Batman thing. I think they had Darksiders 2, Mass Effect 3, Tank, Tekken Tag Tournament 2, and there was a nice Mario nod in that right at the end where one of the characters got a mushroom and it kind of made the sound effect and he grew up in size. Trying to Ninja Gaiden 3, although I've typo there, Ninja Faden, and then Aliens. Now, most of those games, certainly Mass Effect, Aliens, Tekken, and as well Batman, would be considered games that would appeal to hardcore, and I'm using it in quotes, gamers, more traditional gaming experiences. And I remember actually when Mass 3 was announced, there was actually a big applause, probably one of the biggest in the conference. And I've heard since then, they should have given more exposure to Mass Effect 3 instead of Batman. And I find that interesting. Mass Effect 3 is ultimately the same thing as Batman. It's a game that's already out. If you want to play it, go buy it and you can play it now. Unless you had a Wii and you didn't have any other games, these games are largely, existing experiences. So to expose one more than the other, they had the Warner Bros. Guy, so presumably that's what they want to put forward. And perhaps Arkham City is going to have a little more tweakage to the Wii U than maybe some of these others. Who knows? But again, I think the key point is that, well, if a game like Mass Effect is coming to the Wii U, well, that indicates that these third parties are not just going to say, oh, well, we'd a dumbed down little system, we'd have to create something totally silly and stripped down, and we won't bother. That this is going to be capable of more in-depth traditional experiences, and that's good. Now, of course, the bad side is that if these titles make up more of the launch, a lot of the experiences won't necessarily be all that new. But anyway, so a lot of titles there, a good handful of traditional experience titles. Hell, there was more titles pretty much announced there than there was in Sony's conference. Now they moved back on to the opposite side of the divide, you could say, and they started talking about Wii Fit and how it has sold 43 million units between Wii Fit and Wii Fit Plus. Naturally, that is very successful. It would be insane of them not to follow it on. To sell that many of a game and a peripheral is sort of mind-boggling. People talk about, they should do, a Kid Icarus game or a Star Fox game, whatever. Star Fox would be lucky to crack 1 million units. If they can do a Wii Fit, and they might sell another 10 million, in terms of resources, in terms of appealing to a market, of course they should do this. It just makes absolute sense. The way I see it with this balancing, I can't remember if I said this in the previous video that got scratched or in one of the first two parts, but it's kind of like a movie studio putting out a broad spectrum of content. You can't just put out all action films or all rom-com films. It has to have a bid for everyone, and that's the whole point. And Wii Fit is definitely a market, or at least it has been. Microsoft did the same with Nike. They clearly see it too, and that looks like a good product too. They also then said how that these type of experiences they want to continue on, and of course that was with Wii Fit U, and they showed how it could be off screen and you could keep working away while someone was watching telly, or it could be on screen, and you had new games and new exercises and new kind of ways to count your calories and all that sort of stuff. And a nice little thing that they added was the pedometer. I've used Nintendo's previous pedometer and they're pretty damn good. I had Walk With Me and the Pokemon Soul Silver. And Pokemon Soul Silver was nice because they actually integrated some Pokemon gameplay, so it was a really nice kind of like real world experience, bringing it in a bit. In fact, I think the concept should be totally expanded, but it's a good idea because, well, you could be doing other activities. And I did actually say at the time when I was using the Walk With Me that it's a pity it was isolated. So clearly that's one thing they want to bring into the next Wii Fit. Now, whether or not that market is still there, whether or not it's going to follow on from the Wii to the Wii U, it's hard to say, because of course that's not just a peripheral investment, that's a console investment. So it's a totally different ball game. Actually, just as a side note, in terms of peripheral investments, this 43 million of the two games, but there's a substantial amount of those were with balance boards. From what I've read before, and I could be mistaken, but it's probably not that far out. The Wii balance board has sold more units than Sega's most successful console and Atari's most successful console. So these are two of the kind of previous big console platform manufacturers, and here we go, the peripheral that blows them away. How can you not support it? They moved on then with another kind of expanded audience title, or a different type of genre, the music genre this time, and it was a game called Sing, working title. Now, the first time I seen that trailer, I have to say I was not very kind in my first video. And I'll still say it was one of the lowlights of E3 in general. But I can see where they're going with it to a certain degree. It really depends on marketing and whatnot. Because if you look at things like SingStar was massive. It was nearly this kind of casual gaming and expanded audience gaming before the Wii really had a push on that marketing approach. And it's good fun. I mean, I've played SingStar and had fun with it. And it's basically a karaoke game, and this is what Sing is. I mean, the novelty now is that because of the second controller, you don't have to be looking at the TV screen, you can be looking at the people you're singing to. It's only a little thing. I think the biggest problem with it was the people in the video, they looked so uncomfortable and wooden. It didn't look like they were enjoying themselves, that this was a good fun time, which is what they're trying to present. I don't know what it is about Nintendo and presenting in music games like Wii Music. They always just make them look crap. So anyway, perhaps a bit of a low light, but I can understand where they were going with it. So we're 38 minutes in, and they've brought out the 3DS section. Now, initially, in the main presentation, they had a quick run through the games, and they said that, well, we're going to give an hour-long presentation of 3DS stuff on its own, so it doesn't kind of get just lost, here with the Wii U stuff. I thought that was a good idea, and I have to say I had very mixed emotions on it, because on the E3 show, when they ran through the titles, other than thinking, it's a bit Mario heavy as well, I went, oh, that's some decent stuff if that's just the highlights, the tip of the iceberg. But since then, I have, where is it now? I've watched the other show, so I've got more notes, and I may as well segue into it and do it here. So right now, I'm just now talking about the 3DS show, which is basically the same thing but expanded out from the E3 mini 3DS section. They had a bunch of titles, and most of them looked fairly decent, to be fair. The 3DS show started off with Reggie giving an introduction. He kind of handed it over. Nice little bit of banter. They talked about sales and how the DS has done quite well, especially with the key software being Zelda selling 1 million units in America, Mario Kart 7 1.7 million, and 3D Land 2 million in America as well. Now, thing to note there, particularly the Mario titles. I mean, not lost in them. The presentation, as I mentioned earlier, was very Mario heavy. The two Mario games were clearly what lifted the console. I've actually got my 3DS for Zelda, and I know others did, but I don't think that was really, they didn't really get much steam out of that. But they did out of Mario, and that was not lost on Nintendo at all. It was case, you want Mario, you're getting Mario. Jeez, we didn't want that much Mario. So yeah, notably, Star Fox didn't crack 1 million, Pilot Wings didn't crack 1 million. I mean, people look for those franchises, but at the end of the day, they don't necessarily sell. So Nintendo aren't going to make them. Just as a complete side note, people often talk about things like Mother. Well, why didn't they release Mother 3, or why don't they make a new one? Well, the Japanese version is a bit of a pet project for a start. Mother has a very intense cult following, but in terms of marketability to make big bucks for Nintendo, they don't see that as a good risk, and I can understand that. So why would they put the money? They have limited resources, so it just doesn't necessarily make sense to do it as much as it might be appreciated by the Earthbound audience, and same with Star Fox and so on. But anyway, enough diversion on the 3DS show. So they started off with Castlevania Lord of Shadow. It looked decent, although I felt the 3D was very rough around the edges, like sub PSP level. Personally, I'm sure it'd be a good game. Then they had, jeez, I don't know what I'm typing here, but I meant to type in Luigi's Mansion. I've got here, Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, and they also mentioned that is going to be a retail and a download game. Again, it looked very nice. It's smidge rough around edges. I kind of thought the GameCube version looked better, to be honest, in terms of graphics, but they have expanded it out with new items and new mansions. So yeah, it's nice to see that franchise. Well, now it's a franchise because there's going to be two games. Before it was just a game. Get another visit, and I also had a bit of a segue then with the word Spectre into Epic Mickey and Power of Illusion. Now I have to say, Epic Mickey was not on my radar. Now, I was aware of the Wii game and Epic Mickey 2, but I was not in any way, looking up information or whatever about the 3DS game. It's called Power of Illusion, and the illusion is a very important part in the name because it strongly references Castle of Illusion on the Mega Drive, which pretty much just blew my mind that they would actually do that. And the developers came on stage and spoke about it, and your man clearly loves Castle of Illusion. And the concept of Epic Mickey has always been this kind of forgotten Disney characters and franchises and things like that, and essentially they wanted to bring that with a gaming spin. So this is kind of like forgotten Disney games, and that's why the Castle of Illusion has been sucked into the wasteland. Now, when he said forgotten kind of gaming franchises sucked into this modern game, that's a superb way to go with retro revisiting. I think there's so much potential there. Like, look at someone like Sega and Wonder Boy and Alex Kidd and Fantasy Zone. Like, they have these properties, Streets of Rage, Golden Axe, that they barely utilize and would make a superb retro revisit. But anyway, so yeah, Castle of Illusion and the baddie of the game, Miserabelle, has been sucked into Wasteland trying to get out. So there's kind of strong reference. The music cues are very clearly from Castle of Illusion, the sound effects and whatnot, and yeah, it's almost like they're trying to nearly make it part of the Illusion series in its own way, but still a separate entity, a modern thing, because it has the paint and thinner thing done with the touchscreen. As I said, it was one of the biggest surprises of E3 for me. I was not expecting it at all, and it's totally on my radar, and a really pleasant surprise, I have to say. And it comes out November the 18th, apparently, in North America. So, on to another bit of Mario. We had Luigi to see. This time round, they tried to break up the Mario. In the E3 show, it went Mario, 3 in a row. Whereas this time, they actually broke them up. I wonder whether that's intentional to make it feel a little less Mario heavy. So, they had Paper Mario Sticker Star. They mentioned that was the first portable Paper Mario game, which is correct, because beforehand, the handheld Mario RPGs were the Mario and Luigi series. So I just have a note there. I wonder, is this the end of the Mario and Luigi games? It would be interesting to see. Those games were pretty good too. They had a totally different take, kind of dual partner play, and a good bit of humour. So it'd be sad to see them end. They probably won't though. So a lot of the visuals actually were probably some of the most impressive visuals. I think they'll work with the 3D effect quite well. Apparently it's coming out for a holiday, and again it's going to be download and retail. So then we got into some third-party stuff. There was Kingdom Hearts 3D Dream Drop Distance. Yeah, that's a catchy title. Looked pretty decent. It's coming out soon enough, the 31st of the 7th. Scribblenauts Unlimited, very similar to the Wii thing. Lego Batman 2. They made a comment that the Lego Batman was actually the best-selling Lego game, which I was surprised by, but there you go. Just shows you how big the Batman franchise is. Again, I guess that explains why they led with Batman Arkham Asylum. Transformers Prime, Rabbids Rumble, or yeah, that's what it's called, Heroes of Ruin by Square Enix. And then they mentioned Pokemon Black and White 2. But this time for the original DS, the little bit of love left. It's kind of is surprising that they're still making that for DS and not 3DS, but I suppose the engine is a DS engine. Yeah, it's also interesting that that's called Black and White 2 instead of another new color or something like. This is the first time they've done this. Normally, when they revisit one of the colored games, they introduce a third color, and it kind of combines it to this time they're doing a sequel, which is very unique. And curious to see how that works. Does it actually add a lot of new content, where before it didn't really add that much content to the third pillar game? Anyway, they did mention that there will be 3DS features for it, and I think what they mean is they mentioned an app, and that's going to be Pokemon Dream Raider, and that'll help you find rare Pokemon and transfer it into the game. So there you go, and that kind of led them segue into the to the eShop talk and how successful it's been. And I think this is a perfect example of how spin can work. They talked about how they had 5 games or applications that had sold or that had been downloaded over 1 million times, and those applications were, from the top of my head, the Pokédex, the Nintendo Video, the Flipnote, Four Swords Adventure, and I'm forgetting the 5th one, but I know it's another one of those kind of application-y type games. I'm thinking now, all of them were free. So you're saying these are your million sellers, but they cost nothing. Of course, if anyone is going to go online, they're the things that they were going to get. So what about the other games, that you put up? How well are they doing, really? And then they said how some of them are really well rated on Metacritic. Is the rating actually translating into something? Curious. And they also mentioned how in North America, 70% of the consoles have already connected. This is a good example of spin. They were like 70% have already connected, and my note is only 70% have connected in North America, where they have the highest broadband penetration and wide availability of Wi-Fi spots that Nintendo pay for, and yet 30% still haven't even connected once. Let alone how many of the 70% repeatedly connect and actually are using it. Now, they did say that on average people have 4.7 applications from the eShop store. Interesting, 4.7, and they have 5 million sellers. So do they count in that 4.7 average? The figures leave a lot to be desired, to be honest. And of course it did lead into the mention of a new Pokédex 3D Pro thing. Great. And that there's going to be more demos coming out, and how retail games from Nintendo, starting with the Mario games, are going to be downloaded as well. And also, rather curiously, because you might not have a credit card or whatever, you can go to a shop, and instead of buying a retail copy of the game, you can buy a product code number thing and go and enter it in and download the game. So I guess if you don't want to bring cartridges around, but to be honest, why not do this? Why not buy a retail copy? And if you have a retail copy, it should have a unique ID. And if you want, you can download the game too, so you don't have to carry the cartridges around. If you're going to go down this kind of download route, I'd be a lot more willing to get on board if you're going to actually provide additional facilities to the customer. Maybe? No? I didn't think so. Now, where was I after that little rant? Yeah, then they talk about new Super Mario Brothers 2. I did say it was very Mario heavy, and it's basically going to be a 2-player co-op game, and there's going to be a big focus on collecting coins. And initially I thought that sounded a bit goofy, but to be fair, when I looked at the gameplays properly, yeah, it looks pretty good. I guess it's 2D Mario. Really, you shouldn't question it. It's like it would take a lot for them to mess that up. And you can fly in the game. Yeah, it's got the raccoon tail again, so that pretty much solves any issues you might have had. Nice Street Pass featured at the demo too, where you could basically set coin challenges for other people to try out, kind of a bit like time trialing. Sounded fun. And that was pretty much the height of it. Oh, Mario's coming out August the 19th in America, so that's also pretty soon. Like, there's, to be fair, there's a good lot of titles coming out, a good lot of decent titles. Yeah, I did find it amusing at the end where the guy who's presenting kind of goes back to Reggie, who's sitting in the audience going, "Did I do okay, boss?" No, you did not. No. Reggie gave him the thumbs up from Nintendo of America. So anyway, where are we nuts? Oh yes, back. Yes, so 3D section. Finished that, and we went back to the Wii U in the main presentation itself, and it was time to bring out Ubisoft. One thing I will say about, well, actually, I'm going to say several things, so I don't know why I'd say that, was Ubisoft definitely seem to have upped their game since the Wii. They're clearly some sort of preferred partner of Nintendo, because when the Wii was launching, they did get a lot of oxygen. And they had a lot of titles, and so the titles were garbage. They had GT Pro, they had Monster 4x4, they had Open Season, they had Red Steel, and blech. I mean, it was bad by and large. Even as a launch game, it barely tided you over. Now they had Rabbids and some people like that, but this time around, though, the titles I feel they cover a broad range of interests, and there's something there for everyone. And as long as, of course, this is the danger, but as long as the hype and the initial impression actually follows true to the release products, I think there'll be something good. You know, there's some good stuff for the launch lineup. They opened up with Just Dance 4. Again, I've said it before, Just Dance 4 is a big hit. It's going to appeal to a certain audience, so it makes sense if it gets a nice showing. They had Reggie basically on the gamepad giving people instructions on the moves to do, and then the dancers would have to do the moves with the Wiimotes. And he made a comment how being the puppet master is like running Nintendo of America. Good one. So then they brought out Zombie U, and there had been a great kind of stylish trailer the day before, but we'd seen some gameplay of it, and it looked good. I have to say, that's definitely one to watch, and I can understand why, at least for the traditional gaming audience, it's getting a lot of press. They also have some sort of zombify feature where it takes your picture and kind of transmorphs it into a zombie. They did it with Reggie. To be honest, I thought it broke up quite badly. I don't think it worked all that well, but it was kind of a fun little throwaway thing all the same. And then they produced their demo reel. It was basically what we've seen in their Ubisoft conference, but they had Assassin's Creed, Rabbids Land, Sports Connection, Avengers, Your Fitness, Rayman Legends. Again, as I said, that's just like you have some hardcore stuff, Zombie, Assassin's Creed, kiddie, more younger stuff or youth friendly stuff, Rabbids, sports stuff, fitness stuff. Yeah, it was a good blend of stuff. Let's hope they can deliver it now, unlike last time. And again, with Assassin's Creed 3, very much so showing how the Wii is going to now get the titles. The Wii U is going to get the titles the Wii did not. So, by this stage, to be fair, Ubisoft have had a demo reel of a good handful of games. We had previous, there would have been about 6 or however many games, maybe 8 games on the 3DS. Then you had the previous trailer reel of games, Darksiders, Mass Effect, so on. You had Batman, you had the Mario games, you had Pikmin. That's quite a lot of games. They've shown way more games than anyone. Especially when you consider most people consider they lost E3, but they showed a lot of content. Part of the reason I think that there was a negative reaction or overall impression from the conference is the ending. The other conferences ended with big titles, good games that, at least for the initial audience that were watching, kind of got a lot of buzz. Good example being like The Last of Us from Sony and Watch Dogs by Ubisoft. Definitely generated a lot of interest. And Nintendo brought out Nintendo Land as their last title. I know a lot of people would have been maybe hoping for maybe a Zelda or a Metroid or something along those lines. Yes, that would have been great, or even Smash Brothers. But the way I see it, those titles are coming. It'd be great to see them, but Nintendo do take their time. They're not Activision. They don't churn this thing out every year, except for Mario. Jeez, they churn those out every 2 months now. But by and large, with their key franchises, they have been careful to nurture them. You will get them, it's a Nintendo platform, and they'll be good, but you have to wait. So it would have been nice to see, but I wasn't all that surprised. I thought maybe if they're going to do all the Mario stuff, maybe Mario Kart 8 or whatever they want to call it, Mario Kart U8. That makes it sound like food. after Mario Kart U8, you can go with Wii Fit U. So Nintendo Land. Anyway, my connection actually cut off at this point, and jumped, and it jumped back, and they were talking about this theme park, a Nintendo theme park, and I was like, "What the hell? They're doing a Nintendo theme park? Where? When? What? Where? I gotta go there. I gotta go." And then it's like a virtual thing. I was like, "Oh, that's so disappointing." And they spent a long time talking about it, kind of like this video, but it wasn't really clear what the hell they were going on about and why this was a big deal. And it was only right at the end that I kind of got it, and they said how Nintendo Land was going to be for the Wii U, what Wii Sports was for the Wii. And I was like, oh, so it's basically going to be a collection of mini games, or smaller game pieces, tied together in a nicely presented package. That's designed to highlight, the various technical and functional aspects of the system. I mean, that's fairly straightforward, really. And they have, I have to say, they present it lovely. It does look really nice. And you have the Miiverse thing integrated into Theme Park, and then you've got the different franchises with motion control and touchscreen things and dual views. So I can see where they're going. It does demonstrate the system. If it's going to be the Wii Sport thing, are we going to get it in the box? They did say it's going to be a launch game, but I wonder if it's separate or what. I think part of the problem with Nintendo Land was it was very badly presented because people didn't really understand what was its significance, and B, I think people were reading in that there was going to be more. It was going to do something more. If you look at the Wii Sports, it was very apparent straight away what it was. Everyone got it. Anyone who wasn't a gamer got it. They could see, oh look, you swing at the racket and it swings, and you play tennis, and it's like, that has immediate novel appeal. It was presented well, and it was just sold itself. That's why that certainly kind of kicked off. It was a killer app. We haven't had a real big killer app in a long time, but Wii Sports was one. But Nintendo Land didn't really seem to have that sort of appeal. Maybe they just presented it wrong, but it certainly I couldn't, see that kind of, oh right, oh you can do that and you can do that, and oh that's so unique and I gotta have it. You'd see things like Ninja Castle where you'd have the controller and you'd flick the thing and you'd flick them from the controller onto the screen. I mean they're nice, but I just didn't quite have that killer app that I think that they were going for, and that kind of left, because that was the end. They reiterated their message about the Wii U again, but that was it. And I kind of left the conference on a very flat note. I mean, if they'd put even a teaser trailer, I think, for Smash Brothers or for Zelda, I think that might have taken the edge of it. Because that was it. People were like, huh? Oh, right, that's it. Not Nintendo Land. And, yeah. And they went on forever about Luigi's Ghost Mansion thing, and no one seemed to really be that interested. I'm sure it'll be fun, but So very odd ending, and took the shine off the conference, I felt. Now overall, I hope it's probably come across that I had some positive things to say. There was definitely some negatives though, and Nintendo Land itself not necessarily being one, but the way it was presented and how it ended the show was perhaps a negative. But also, of the titles, there was plenty of titles across the spectrum of interests, and I think that was good to see. But with the exception of Ubisoft, I wasn't seeing a hell of a lot of content developed for the Wii U. Now I know part of the reasoning for having things like Batman and Mass Effect and Assassin's Creed was to show that, look, we're not being left out in the dark this time. The big titles are coming to this platform. But where's the kind of the zombie use? Where's even Rayman Legends or things like that are not necessarily traditional games, but different type of things that other companies are doing with the Wii U? We didn't see a lot of it. A little bit of it, but I definitely would have wanted to see more. I think that was a bit missing from the presentation, and to be honest, a little bit from E3 as a whole. It would concern me that we're going to see another. We're going to see developers nearly fall to the opposite thing, where they go, now we can just port our games over. We don't have to bother and just port it onto the Wii U. Well, we'll need unique, interesting experiences too. It's good to address the failing of the Wii, but we don't want to fall back where it's just, you either get your sports game, your Wii Sports game, or your dancing game, or you get Assassin's Creed ported over. We want something that does something unique too. So that was kind of the downside. I personally felt. It was a good show. A lot of people have said, Jesus, it was desperate and whatnot. I don't think it was that bad at all. I think they showed a lot of content, a lot of interesting stuff. I mean, if it was to come out tomorrow, would I buy it? I don't know. I would still be kind of on the fence. Maybe the price would help. If it was black, believe it or not, would help. I know that's terribly fickle, but it's funny how you can decide, purchases on color. But yeah, it was interesting. I'll leave it at that anyway, because I'm getting tired, and I'm sure I had something more interesting to say when I ended my previous versions of these videos, but I've forgotten. Oh well, I guess I'll leave it for another day. I don't know if I'll do any more E3 videos, because it'll just be repeating the same ground, unless there's something else that comes up or whatnot. So obviously I'd be curious to hear what you think. Am I totally barking mad on Nintendo and their presentation, or the other presentations too? And if you managed to sit through all of this, because I'm sure this has been incredibly long, much longer than the other ones, congratulations, and you deserve a prize. But, well, I don't have a prize, so just congratulations, and well done. But thanks to everyone for watching both these quite long E3s and any of my videos at all, short or long. And yeah, as always, click to subscribe, and don't forget, if you didn't see the other parts, that there's links overhead somewhere. Yes, I figured out those annotations these days. That's great. Anyway, I'm tired. I should stop rambling and leave it there. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back with probably a Top 3 Tuesday video soonish. Oh, it's been a busy week.